There's a pile of ironing to be done anyway. Camilla laughed. Somehow I can't imagine you in a penny. Jack had just finished the dishes after his evening meal when David walked into the kitchen with a liter and a half bottle of rum, Coke, crisps, and nuts. Righty-ho, old fruit. Time for a jolly old chinwag, I think. I take it you and Milla have decided I'm your new charity case. Milla may have, dear boy, but as far as I'm concerned, you're only my oldest chum. You still talk like some old Sir Buffton Tufton, David. Yes, it's handy in court. The opposition still underestimates me. Old chap works wonders sometimes. Apart from all that, I know full well you are still bottling everything up. The ankle biters are out of the way, so you can get uproariously drunk and suffer in peace, if not in pieces, in the morning. We'd better tend to the horses first then. Move them into the pasture. The police caught the horse slasher so they can graze away, and we won't have to worry about them too early. David carefully got Jack drunk while he maintained his own sobriety and then got him to bed. He checked the horses and locked the house before retiring himself. Next morning, David dragged Jack from bed, and they both went for a run, then showered, before having breakfast. You haven't said anything about the divorce, Jack? Nothing to say. Bollocks. I know you better than anyone except perhaps Milla. You've bottled everything up for the sake of the kids. If you don't release the pressure, the boiler will burst. Did Milla send you to do this? Heaven's sake, Jack. Milla isn't the only one who cares about you. Give me some credit. Sorry, David. I know it was you steered me in the right direction first. Damn right. Now, I know you. Diane's lucky she's still vertical. So, spill. I don't know, David. Milla convinced me that the kids would need their mother as well as me. I've come to terms with it. If I do anything to her, it's just going to hurt Harry and Georgie. Their mother has caused them enough turmoil without me making things worse. All very mature. Did you deliberately screwed up the tax and insurance on the car? Actually, no. I'm not saying I wasn't pleased about it, but when I met her, Diane was pretty high-powered. She looked after that stuff for her boss. I'd have thought she'd have realized about it. Of course, I tended to deal with all that, so she probably didn't know it was due precisely then. What exactly are you gonna do then? Just get on with life. The job's secure. In fact, if I wanted, I could probably give it up and live of my investments. It wouldn't be flash, but I could get by. The kids are okay at school, and Harry will be doing his GCSEs soon. So I'll just have to suck it up and get on with it. I'm not really talking about that. Divorce is as bad as bereavement. I'm a solicitor. I've seen plenty of both. You could do with some counseling. Counseling? Do you think I'm some sort of a nutter? Far from it. But you need to get it out of your system. You haven't talked to me or Milla, so maybe a stranger would be best. You and Milla did cook this up between you then? Jack sighed. No, Jack, we didn't cook anything up. We're both concerned about you, that's all. We're both prepared to listen, and we're both prepared to help whatever way we can. Thanks, David. I really did love her, you know? Tears started to flow. I know. Thank God, David thought. At last, some emotion. If he'd bottled it much longer, things could really have gone downhill fast, and that wasn't going to help the kids. She always seemed happy with me. She really was a good wife. What the hell did I do? I don't think you did anything, Jack. She just seemed to have made some sort of decision. But why? That's what I don't understand. I really don't think you're going to find out. I think it was just her. I think you are going to have to accept it and move on, mate. Dry your eyes, mate. Huh. What? That song by the Streets, Dry Your Eyes, Mate. I know it's hard to take it, but her mind is made up, or something like that. Oh, well, maybe. Let's go take the horses out for a jaunt. Together, the old friends got the horses into the stables. As they were saddling too, Milla and Simon drove in. Jack looked at David and raised an eyebrow. Nothing to do with me. The pal, said Simon, leading out a bay gelding and saddling up. Prince of Wales? Sounds good to me, said David. I think George keeps that field just for riders to put their horses in to increase his trade. Well, it sure as heck works. To the bridleway and beyond. The afternoon passed discussing the finer points of the horses unsaddled in the field beside the pub, and then the four friends ambled back by the bridleway again. As they were rubbing the horses down in the yard, Peter drove in with Harry and Georgie. I dropped Diane off before we came over. I thought it would avoid any nastiness, said Peter. Thanks, said Jack. Did they behave? Oh yes, they were very good. I think we got on all right. Peter ruffled Harry's hair. Diane is another matter though, he cautioned. Thanks for dropping them back. See you later, kids, Peter called as he drove off. Jack noted that Harry and Georgie waved, happily. With the horses cooled and stabled, David, Milla, and Simon left. Right, you pair, supper. Jack ushered the children into the house. Having got Georgie to bed, Jack and Harry were doing the dishes in the kitchen. Mum's very angry all the time, Dad. Harry commenced. Georgie is really upset about everything. What about you, son? Oh, I'm all right. Jack took the opportunity to talk things through with his son to reassure him and to find out how Georgie was. In a way, Harry seemed to be dealing with the situation better than he was, but David's chat had focused his mind somewhat, and he knew that it was time to take his friend's advice. Harry went to bed and Jack sat down with the newspaper and a cup of tea. The doorbell rang. Jack checked the viewer and saw 2 police officers. He opened the door. Are you John Winters? Asked the male officer. Yes, what can I do, FO? John Winters, you are under arrest for assault on Diane Winters. The female officer stepped forward and Jack stepped back, only to receive a face full of pepper spray followed by a blow to his solar plexus, which momentarily paralyzed his breathing. He pitched forward and felt his arms being pulled behind his back and handcuffed. He was dragged unceremoniously to the police car, gasping for breath and trying to tell the officers about Harry and Georgie. Diane didn't believe Jack's protestation of innocence. Cold fury replaced the burning embarrassment. It festered the whole weekend, and she was very withdrawn. Peter tried to make up for her lack of involvement with the children, and it only made her angrier. This should have been a chance for them to reconnect. Her plan to win them over to the idea of coming to live with her in Devon had been sidelined by Jack's dirty tricks. Well, if that was how he wanted to play it, she was more than a match for him. The pain in her arse gave her an idea of how to deal with that other pain in her arse. When Peter dropped her off at the flat before leaving the children off, she promptly drove down to the police station. Diane asked the officer on the occurrence desk if she could speak with a female officer, and after a short wait was taken into an interview room. She told the policewoman, WPC Graham, that she had gone to collect her children for an agreed visitation, but that her husband had at first refused to let them come with her. She claimed that her daughter was crying and trying to get to her, but when she tried to go to her, Jack had pushed her to the ground. The police officer took note of all the details and arranged for a medical examination. She made note of the fact that Jack had been in the services and asked if he had any record of violence. Diane told her how he had been a boxer and how he had been involved in some kind of attack on another sailor. WPC Graham left Diane with the doctor for the medical examination and spoke with her sergeant. When the doctor was finished, the constable checked that Diane would be going back to a safe place and that she knew how to contact the station if there was any threat from her ex-husband. She convinced the duty sergeant that Mr. Winters should be arrested on a domestic violence charge. Taking a male officer, PC Connors, with her, she went to Jack's house. As soon as the door opened, Constable Graham made the arrest, squirted him with pepper spray, and hit him with her baton. The 2 officers cuffed him and loaded him into the car. Once he was in the car, the policeman wanted to know what she was doing using the spray and baton. I told you on the way over he had a history of violence. Yeah, but he didn't do anything. What did you want? He assaulted his wife. He's got previous. If he put you down, what would have happened to me? All you say is he threatened us, and it was the only way to make the arrest. Yeah, but are you trying to let a wife beater get away with it? Is that it? No, but you just back me up. You don't want to be known as someone who doesn't back up his oppo. Back at the station, Jack was processed by the custody sergeant. WPC Graham made her statement. Connor's contribution consisted of yes at the appropriate moments. Jack was placed in a cell and told he had to wait for the doctor, but as it was shift change over, he might be a while. All his attempts to tell them about the children were ignored. Jack felt he had been in the cell for hours when the door opened and a voice said, I thought it might be you. Looking up through bleary eyes, Jack peered and replied, Hinshaw? Able Seaman Jimmy Hinshaw? As was, sir. Hinshaw was delighted. I didn't think you'd remember me. What the hell are you doing here? Jack told Sergeant Hinshaw about his children. A car was dispatched immediately, and then Jack explained his story. When he finished, Jimmy Henshaw dropped a bombshell on him. "You know that witch that nicked you, Graham?" "Yes. Her maiden name's McVeigh." "What?" A constable interrupted them. "Skip, Winters' lawyer's here." "That's Mr. Winters to you, Constable. This man saved my life." "Sorry, Sergeant. Mr. Winters' lawyer is here." "Right. Show him into the interview room and get Inspector Willis down there, pronto." Things started to move quickly after that. David was waiting for them. The moment they walked into the interview room, he started to speak. Sergeant Henshaw raised his hand to stop him. "I think, sir, there's more to this than would appear. So if you don't mind, I think we should wait until the inspector gets here." David looked at Jack, who agreed. "Are the kids okay?" Jack asked. "Yes, Harry was at the top of the stairs and saw what happened. He phoned your father. He and your mom ran down to them and phoned me. They are safe at your parents' house." The inspector arrived. Sergeant Henshaw took him to the next interview room to outline events, using the reports from Constable Graham and the custody sergeant as the starting point. "From what I can see here, sir, WPC Graham has seriously mishandled this inquiry. She responded to the initial complaint properly, but the arrest is a clusterfuck." When he had finished his assessment, the inspector shook his head grimly. "Shit, this looks like a case for complaints and discipline. It'll probably have to go to the Police Complaints Commission. I'm going to have to get someone in from outside. The chief and the super are going to hang out of us. Thanks for the heads up, by the way." "Hardly us, boss. This all happened last shift." "Yeah, but we uncovered it. They shoot the messenger round here." They returned to David and Jack. David went on the attack immediately. The inspector interrupted him. "We are releasing Mr. Winters immediately on police bail. There seems to be a lot more to this case than meets the eye. I'm going to have to refer this up the chain. If you'll excuse me, I'll leave you with Sergeant Henshaw to complete the formalities. I'm going to prepare a report for the chief inspector." When he had gone, Sergeant Henshaw sat them both down. "This is totally off the record here, okay?" He looked inquiringly at Jack and David. David looked at Jack, who nodded. "Okay," said David. "What happened on Friday evening?" "Nothing here is evidential." "Nothing. Look, you'll get all this under the rules of evidence, so I'll tell you what Mrs. Winters said. She claims that Commander Winters—" "That's plain old Mr. now, but I'll settle for Jack," said Jack. Sergeant Henshaw grinned. "Mrs. Winters claimed she arrived to pick up the children. Jack refused and assaulted her." Oh, said David. "I'm a witness to that incident. I'm not going to be able to act for you, Jack." Sergeant Henshaw groaned. "This just gets better and better." She reported the assault and WPC Graham responded. "It looks to me like she was looking some payback for her father." Henshaw noted David's puzzlement. Jack and WPC Graham's father had a run-in when Jack was in the Navy. David nodded. "And she thought she could hang him out to dry. I told the inspector I'd get your side of the story so we can figure out just how we are going to proceed. It looks to me like she overreacted, and you have the best get-out-of-jail-free card ever." David looked at Jack. "Well, normally I would tell you to say nothing and get Milo in here pronto. But this looks like Diane and Graham have messed up big style. If you trust the sergeant here, it might worth telling him what happened." "All off the record," said Henshaw. "Okay," agreed Jack. After Jack had explained the sequence of events, Jimmy Henshaw sat back, sucked his teeth and said, "Ooh shit. The inspector is not going to like this one bit. It pretty much confirms what I thought. Look, I'll have to go over this with him. So, as he said, you're released on bail. We'll get in touch with your solicitor when we have something. If you could let us know who that'll be?" David gave him Milla's details. David ran Jack to his parents' house. Jack's mother had got the kids to bed, and she and his father had also retired, so Jack got David to drop him off at his house. As David drew up, the security light came on. "Jack, do you still use the cameras?" Jack had a security system installed when someone had been attacking and killing horses. "Yes, actually, I do. We'll have to get the recordings and make sure we retain copies. I'll sort that with Milla. You get some sleep." I stretched languorously, only to be brought up short as the bruised muscles of my belly screamed their memory of the previous evening. Doubled up to relieve the pain, I revisited the events of the preceding night. The sun filtering through the curtains filled the bedroom with a warmth that I did not share. A mixture of cold determination and seething anger focused my thoughts. There is no way I'm taking any more of her shit. I addressed the house. Gently uncurling, I lifted the phone. My first call was to my parents to check how Harry and Georgie were. Once reassured that they had been packed off to school to keep their routine as normal as possible, I phoned Milla. "My name is Jack Winters. May I speak to Miss Fielding, please?" The receptionist put me through immediately. Evidently, Milla was expecting my call. "Jack, when can you come in? David is on standby." "What time is it?" "Geez, I really slept in, didn't I?" The clock showed 10:15. "I'll phone into work and see you at 12. We can continue after lunch if needs be." "Noon is fine. I'll phone David. Bye." I phoned my PA and explained I would be out of the office for the rest of the day, breakfasted lightly, and having performed the usual morning chores, copied the security tapes for Friday and Sunday nights. On arrival, I was shown immediately into Milla's office. David was already there. "Oh good, you brought the tapes. David has told me everything, but if you run through your version, Jack, to see if there is anything significant he missed." I recounted his version of events. "Good," said Milla. "No real differences there. And what there are, simply reflect who could see what from where they were standing. Let's go to lunch and we'll chat about what to do next." We repaired to a local pub. Good food, good beer, and set out with booths that would allow us a degree of privacy. I'm not letting the witch get away with this, Milla. I don't give a flying fiddler's shit about keeping up appearances or anything else. I am going to screw her life big style. I opened. "Whilst I sympathize with the general thrust of your sentiment, old son, I rather think it might be somewhat counterproductive vis-a-vis the old freedom stakes," opined David, in his best Colonel Blimp impersonation. I had to laugh, then swore. "Bugger, my stomach still aches." Okay, I get it. David is right. You've done everything right so far. We are not about to let you blow it," said Milla. "Maybe so, but right now Plod reckons I'm a wife-beater. That is not going to do me any favors in a custody hearing. I have already been on to the police. They are in a real dilemma over the whole thing, and I intend to keep them off balance." Milla was not the sort of lawyer who saw the police as the enemy, but if they stepped out of line, she treated them like any other opponent of her client. "That's all well and good, Milla, but I've done everything you advise and she is still dictating my life to me. She wanted out, but I can't move on because of her. I've a new life to build and it's going to be on my terms, not someone else's." "Jack, Milla and I both understand that, but the only way you are going to be able to do that is if we keep you clean and clear with the legal side of things. The arbitration is binding, but you hit the nail when you mentioned custody hearings. That might just be what she is up to, and if you go off, half-baked, you will definitely land in the poo." "David is right, Jack. We need to get this assault charge dealt with properly. David's input is the clincher. Dealt with properly, you'll be free and clear, and it will turn round and bite her in the arse. She made a false accusation and wasted police time. If we can get the police to charge her, then anything she tries to bring up in court would be looked at very carefully. But she has totally blown it by making the false allegation. You have got to keep calm and let us deal with that." The waitress arrived with the meals, lasagna and salad for Milla, beef and Guinness pies with chips and mushy peas for David and me. "Could we have another 2 pints and a glass of white wine, please?" I asked. All right. I'll leave that side of things to the pair of you, but I want her out of my life." "Do you know what you want your life to be?" asked David. Well, exactly. At the moment, you are still getting used to the whole idea of not being part of a couple anymore. You have no idea what you want, only that you don't want what you have. You need to talk to someone, either us or a counselor," David continued. "Sometimes it's best to talk to someone independent, Jack. We're here to back you up in any way we can, but our view is colored because we are your friends," Milla concurred. I looked at the pair of them. Their faces were both pictures of earnest concern. Some would say worry. Knowing you pair, you have a name all lined up for me. Their faces softened with relief. Both Milla and David had obviously been concerned that my naval background would have made me more difficult to convince. Milla passed me a card. Grief and bereavement counseling? Yes, you're a bit past the marriage counseling bit, and you need to move on. A grief counselor will help more with that. Marriage counselors tend to be for reconciliation or guiding you to a decision about the future of your relationship. You have split up, and that is more like bereavement. No, David, be straight with me. Don't pull your punches. I laughed. Mila looked nonplussed. David gave me the raised eyebrow, pursed lip, don't talk crap look. You wouldn't let me away with it, so you know I'm going to give it to you the same way, Jack, he replied. I grinned at my best friend. The pompous facade had disappeared, replaced by the concern of a lifelong friend. I looked at Mila and saw the same. You know, I was lost for words. Thanks, both of you. De nada, old fruit. David, grinning broadly, ducked behind his shield of portentousness again. Mila simply laid her hand on mine and smiled. Right, I think I'll go pick up the kids then, I said to fill the self-conscious silence. Oh, no, you don't, Mila leapt in. You are well over the drink drive limit. David opened his mouth to speak. Both of you, she glared. I'll drive you both home. You can pick up your cars tomorrow. David again tried to interject, but Mila simply pointed to her untouched wine. Oh well, can't let them go to waste, he said, passing one to me and lifting the other for himself. Pigs, complete and utter pigs, Mila laughed. My parents picked up the children and his car for him. Once home, Georgie wouldn't leave my side. I knew I had to talk to them both about the previous night. I told them exactly what had happened. I hate her. Georgie cried. I don't want to see her again. I don't want to go to that horrible apartment anymore. She curled into my arms, sobbing on my chest. Harry was obviously upset, but struggling manfully to conceal it. How can she say you hit her? She hit you. We both saw it. That's why Georgie wasn't very happy over the weekend. Your mom is upset and confused. She misses both of you. Well, it's her own fault. Georgie declaimed. She is still your mom and she loves you? Then why is she doing this to us? Sometimes people change as they grow older, darling. They see things differently and want different things. Do you want different things, Daddy? Bang, there it was. Out in the open. That is what has been scaring her, and probably Harry too. Did Diane do this because she didn't want them? And did I want to rid himself of them too? Wrapping both of them in my arms and squeezing them tightly, I told them, the only thing I want different is that your mummy didn't go away. I just want everything to go back to what it was before. All four of us happy together again. But I don't think that will ever happen. So that means that I want the three of us to be happy together, forever. Like the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all. I kissed them both on the forehead. I love you both very, very much, and I'll never leave you. Georgie snuggled in further, and Harry, sitting up straight, said, Cup of tea, Dad? Yes, please, son, I smiled. It was abundantly clear to me that Diane's actions were affecting the children deeply. Initially, I had taken the counselor's card as a sop to David and Mila. Now I decided to make an appointment to see what could be done to help the kids. The more I thought about it, the more I worried about Harry. At first, I had thought he was coping better than his sister. Now I thought he was bottling things up, trying to be strong for his sister and, indeed, me, his father. I came into the kitchen from attending to the horses. The children were noisily preparing breakfast. The doorbell rang. The children's gaiety died immediately, to be replaced with anxiety. Don't answer it, Daddy, Georgie pleaded. I reassured her everything was under control, but used the door viewer. I saw two women I didn't recognize, who gave off the air of busybody officialdom. Opening the door, one of the women flashed some sort of ID and tried to push past me saying, We are from social services, child protect? That was enough. I had held my foot against the door for just such an eventuality, blocking the open space with my body. I'm sorry, I said loudly. You are not coming into my house. With that, I closed the door firmly. Harry, who had followed him into the hall, ran back into the kitchen and locked the back door. The women stood outside, loudly proclaiming, We have right of access, Mr. Winters. If you don't let us in, we shall return with the police and have you arrested. I phoned both Mila and David. David was about to leave for his office and promptly diverted directly to my house. When he arrived, the social services people tried to follow him in. As soon as he identified himself as my solicitor, they promptly withdrew. Mila, in the meantime, had dashed from her half-eaten breakfast straight to her office and was on to both the police and the local council. Neither realm of officialdom was particularly forthcoming with any information until she told them the name of her chambers and that she would issue writs against them for harassment. The name and threat of legal action, whilst not producing immediate results, did elicit promises of returned phone calls from higher-placed officials. Mila gave a deadline of 10:30 for a response. Not that she really expected things to move that quickly, but she had found it best to use the stick rather than the carrot when dealing with bureaucracy. David, meanwhile, was arranging matters with me. We allow them into the house under my supervision to check on the kids and the conditions they are living in. Why should they get in at all? Because then we can say they were given access. We limit the time they have by taking Harry and Georgie to school. David went to the social worker's car and told them that the children were getting their breakfast and would be going to school. He informed them that they could come in and check conditions in the home, which they did. Once more, my habit of tidiness proved its worth. Everything from the previous evening had been cleaned and tidied. Additionally, due to the hiatus of the weekend, I had got a little behind in the laundry, so that not only were the children's rooms tidy, but their beds had been stripped and fresh bedding laid out. The children were sitting to table, eating a breakfast of fruit, cereal, poached egg, and toast, when the two women entered the kitchen. Harry and Georgie greeted them with a polite, "Good morning." Once they had finished, they excused themselves from the table and got their blazers and school bags as I cleared the table. Picking up the children's lunches, I asked the social workers to leave and David escorted them to the front door. They were still sitting in their car as we both drove off. Surprisingly, the police responded to Mila's call within half an hour. The duty inspector from the station which had arrested me apologized for the delay in answering her inquiry. He explained that no action had been taken against Mr. Winters, adding, "Since you represent Mr. Winters, I have been authorized to inform you that, as a result of the complaint by Mrs. Winters and subsequent police action, an internal investigation has been implemented. The officers concerned have been relieved of operational duties." "Well then, why are child protection camped on Mr. Winters' doorstep?" demanded Mila. "I'm sorry, Miss Fielding, I don't know, but they did not receive any information from us. Mila phoned me at the office and brought me up to date. I'm going to push for a case conference on this, Jack." "What for? I haven't done anything." It's an unfortunate truth that these people are more used to dealing with difficult families on the lower end of the social scale. They'll make a meal out of this, all in the name of political correctness, if we let them. You're saying I'm just a scalp to them? That just about sums it up. But they didn't reckon on dealing with the three of us, Mila hinted, darkly. With that, Mila phoned David to work on a plan of action. Later, just after lunch, the Social Services Department finally returned her call. Unsurprisingly, they contradicted what the police had told Mila. We were contacted by a Constable Graham on Monday morning that she was handling a case involving an assault by Mr. Winters on his wife. She told us that he had not informed the police of the children's presence in the house when he was arrested. She also said she believed they were at risk from assault or abandonment. "And it took you 24 hours to respond?" commented Mila. "Oh, well, we are very busy with lots of cases. We sent a team round as quickly as we could to remove the children to a place of safety," the senior caseworker replied. Clearly, she was completely unaware that Mila was not interested in her tardiness, except insofar as it delayed her response to Mila's inquiries. "I don't think you quite understand, Ms. Aristides. I represent Mr. Winters, and we are concerned that your department is being used to harass him." Well, I can assure you we know Constable Graham and have worked with her, so we have no reason to doubt her. I'm sure that is the case, but I think it would be appropriate for you to delay any further action in this matter." Zoe Aristides recovered her composure. "I'm afraid when we have a report like this, we have to investigate as promptly as possible, Miss Fielding," she said, primly. "Well, in that case, I think it would be appropriate to hold an emergency case conference immediately, don't you? Perhaps you should get in touch with the police and Mrs. Winters. Mr. Winters and I shall be at your office at 4 o'clock. Please have all the other interested parties present." "I don't think that is possible. You are charged with child safety, Ms. Aristides. Believe me, it is not in your personal or departmental interests to delay this matter. 4 o'clock. Thank you." Mila hung up. Mila got David and me to her office as quickly as possible to prepare her plan of attack. We can't be sure of their approach to this, but there are a couple of issues we will have to deal with, namely the alleged assault and Jack's arrest. However, having spoken to the police this morning, I don't think the arrest is going to be a problem. Diane may be more of a problem. If she sticks to her story, I contributed morosely. Yes, and we don't want to let her know too much about our defense. But again, I don't see that as being a problem. All we have to do is focus everything on the children's well-being, said David. They thrashed through all the obstacles they foresaw, and finally Mila said, "Right, I think we are on top of everything. Just remember, Jack, you say absolutely nothing unless David or I tell you to." Okay, the big four then. The what? Name, rank, number, and date of birth. Oh, funny. I'll just give Allison a shout. She'll take notes for us. The foursome arrived at the offices of the social services, and they were directed to a conference room. It was clear that no expense had been spent on office furniture. At least they aren't wasting ratepayers' money on creature comforts, said Jack. Certainly not down here where the work is done. They turned to see a rather harassed-looking woman of about their own age. Dressed in a dark top, loose-fitting slacks, and flat, sensible shoes, she looked every inch the overworked, underpaid, uncredited functionary who made local government achieve anything. If I had what they spent on refurbishing the director's offices, I could have 3 more caseworkers. I'm Zoe Aristides. How do you do? She offered her hand. I'm Camilla Fielding. We spoke earlier, said Milla, taking the proffered greeting. This is Mr. Jack Winters, my client, Mr. David Cavendish, my colleague, and Ms. Allison Williams, my PA. She'll be taking notes for us. Oh, I'd love to have someone who could take notes. I have to settle for using a dictaphone, and sometimes it is difficult to make out what is said. You don't mind, do you? Just at that, Diane and Alan Davies, her solicitor and David's partner, came in along with Inspector Willis. Diane had a hunted look in her eyes. What's going on, Jack? Why are we here? She almost pleaded. You should know, Diane. You set the whole train in motion. This is your wreck. Jack, Milla cautioned. Hello again, Mr. Winters, said Inspector Willis. Hello, Inspector. Nice to see you again. Maybe someday it won't be in an official capacity. Thanks for that, he grinned. Once everyone was seated, Zoe Aristides opened. Well, Miss Fielding, this is as much your meeting as mine, so perhaps you would like to start? Thank you. Why is your department investigating the Winters family and threatening to take the children into care? You're what? Shrieked Diane. Jack, what is going on? She was becoming extremely agitated. Alan, what is this all about? That's what we're here to find out. It seems to be something to do with Mr. Winters' arrest on domestic violence charges. Is that correct, Ms. Aristides? Diane paled and gasped. She looked at me. My look was an interplay between resigned disgust, anger, and contempt. She blushed and looked ashamed. I think she realized that her actions had turned all the love and esteem in which I once held her had turned to scorn. Zoe noted the unspoken interchange. Along with the initial report from the field workers and the legal representation, she formed a shrewd idea of what had happened. Our department received a phone call from Constable Graham yesterday morning. She informed us that she had been called out to a report of domestic violence. When she had got there, she had to arrest Mr. Winters, who had not informed her and her colleague of the presence of the children. As a result, I snorted. Milla rested her hand on my arm to restrain me. Again, Zoe noted the interjection. There was clearly a degree of indignation on the part of Mr. Winters. As a result, she continued, the children had been left alone in the house. I nearly exploded. Both Milla and David held him back. Zoe Aristides was far from a fool. While she knew that people could be adept at covering up child abuse, she had plenty of experience. The last thing her department needed was to be used as a weapon in a custody dispute. There were far too many real cases of abuse going uninvestigated. She did not, however, expect what followed. I think, Ms. Aristides, your department has been slightly misled. This from Inspector Willis. When Mr. Winters was brought to the station, he was unable to communicate with Constable Graham and her partner. It was only when he was in the custody suite and sufficiently recovered that his first concern was the children. By this stage, Constable Graham had gone off duty. Milla looked at me and shook her head, warning me to stay silent. She had a twinkle of victory in her eye. Perhaps Const Graham was a little overzealous in involving us, observed Zoe. But there remains the assault by Mr. Winters on his ex-wife. Everyone noted the stress she put on the word ex. All eyes turned to Diane. Her body language spoke for her. Her face was the color of a traffic light at stop. She seemed to have shrunk in her seat and looked for all the word as if she wanted the proverbial earth to open up and swallow her. Milla spoke. I think that can await the outcome of the police investigation, Ms. Aristides, don't you? I think you are right, Miss Fielding. I'll take personal charge of this file. Once I have the results of the police investigation, I'll be in touch with you directly. Addressing the rest of the meeting, if no one has anything more, I think we can close this meeting? Looking round, she saw no dissent. Thank you all for coming. Perhaps next time we'll meet in more propitious circumstances. I noticed that her gaze lingered momentarily longer on one of us. Can I have a word, Ms. Aristides? Asked the inspector. Once everyone had left the room, Zoe asked, Okay, Sam, who has dropped us in the shit? When did Graham phone you, Chris? Zoe checked her notes. 9:05 on Monday morning. Why? Because she went off shift at 11 on Sunday night and was on a rest day on Monday. We didn't find out about the kids until I came on shift at 11. So either she knew about them and left them alone, or someone phoned her when we found out. She's either covering her arse or using you for her own purposes. Look, keep all this under your hat. This whole case stinks, and I'm not about to go down because someone messed up. You don't need the flack either. Keep the case pending, but as you say, you take it on. I'll let you know what's happening our end. For heaven's sake, keep your I's dotted and your T's crossed on this one. Those solicitors Winters has working for him are ruthless, and what's more, they are his personal friends. Thanks for the warning, Sam. Would you mind explaining what went on there? I asked, somewhat bewildered. I think it's safe to say, my dearest chap, that once the dust has settled, you are gratis and transparent. He means free and clear, said Milla. I wouldn't quite go that far, but I think we are looking at the endgame. Shame you have to go look after the old ankle biters. Chilly, old boy. I rather feel that this deserves a few more than enough, and a decent bit of scoff to go with them. David did not share Milla's reserve. The fact that he had also reverted to one of their childhood nicknames for me only served to demonstrate his relief at how things had gone. I'll have the notes typed up first thing in the morning, Miss Fielding, said Allison. Thank you, Ollie. I'll see you in the morning. As Allison left, a rather contrite Diane approached, the convivial air chilled. Jack? She asked softly. Can I have a moment, please? I did not need any guidance from his friends. I nodded my assent. I think I should talk to you about some things. Clear the air, so to speak. Perhaps we could go for a drink or meal or something. Ever the gentleman, I could do no less than agree. I think perhaps the children need some reassurance. Maybe if you came and had dinner with us this evening, then you and I can talk afterwards. Milla and David smiled at each other. Jack was going to be fine. That evening, Diane and I shared a meal with Harry and Georgie. Georgie was still taciturn around her mother, but Harry was his father's son and knew this was a time to make an effort. Once the table was cleared and the dishes washed, the children settled down to finish their homework before relaxing in front of the TV. Georgie did not want to go to bed, but Harry coaxed her and promptly announced he was tired and was going to play his PlayStation in his room before going to bed. Diane took a deep breath and launched straight into what she had to say. I am so sorry for what I have put you through, Jack. I have got everything wrong. No, don't interrupt. I need to get this out while it is still straight in my head. I didn't realize what I had in you. I have thrown away the best thing I will ever have. I thought I knew you, but I didn't. I should have known you were not going to roll over and let me take everything, but I mistook your grace for lack of resolve. You showed me I had misread you. I'm sorry to say I misread you too. I've been completely selfish. I always have been, really. It was when I realized how my selfishness very nearly had our children taken into care that I came to my senses. I was angry that you didn't just settle for what I decided you should settle for. I really should have known you would stand up for yourself. You have never settled for less than what was yours, and never demanded more than your due. I understand that now. So where do you go from here, Diane? Ha! She laughed humorlessly. Where does Diane go? Not, where do we go? You know where you are going, and I will have no part in it. Sure I won't? Well, when I started working in the boutique, I was good at it, and I thought I had potential to develop it. I thought if I could get a share in the business, I could make something for myself. I thought if I divorced you, I could buy in with the settlement. I didn't realize you were thinking along the same lines and had already bought a share for me. I suppose it was going to be an anniversary present? I nodded. I really screwed up there, didn't I? She said bitterly. I so nearly had everything, and instead of talking to you, I chose selfishness. Recrimination isn't helping, Diane. Every time I try to get on with my life, your vindictiveness screws it up on me. It's time you moved on and let the kids and me move on too. I'll put it right, Jack, I promise. I'll go to the police and withdraw my complaint and sort it all out. You've really been more than fair in the settlement and access. I'll put things right with my babies too. Can I start coming round in the evenings again? I think we'll just put that on the long finger for the moment, Diane. I deserve that. I think maybe I should go. Can I look in on the kids before I go? I think you should. Diane spoke to both the children separately. Despite her earlier protestations, Georgie welcomed her mom. Harry initially listened politely, and as she was leaving, hugged her tightly and said, "You did it all wrong, Mom, but I still love you." Diane broke down. She thought back to her reaction when Jack had left the house after she presented her ultimatum. Maybe the emotion lacking in their marriage was not Jack's but hers. Too late to find out now. Whilst things settled down at home, we were still subject to visits from Child Protection Services. However, these were carried out by Zoe Aristides and one of her senior caseworkers. They established that Harry and Georgie were settled in their home environment and school. Nevertheless, it grated that I was still under a degree of supervision. The kids seemed unfazed by the visits, and their schoolwork was unaffected. That, at least, took some pressure off me. They continued to visit their mother and Peter at weekends. Diane asked me if she could take them down to the house on the south coast. I had to get clearance from Zoe, but she was content to allow it provided I was. She was keen to get them to re-establish a relationship with their mother. On occasions, Diane would visit the house in the evenings and dine with us. I kept things as light as I could, but I still resented her for what she had done to us. But that lessened over the months. Mila kept me informed of how things were going with the police investigation, but they worked at their own rate, and things progressed slowly. The most interesting development from my point of view came when Jimmy Henshaw phoned one evening. "Fancy going for a beer, boss?" Since I hadn't heard anything direct from the police before, I quickly realized that Jimmy was going outside the system. Sounds good to me. When suits. Tomorrow evening in the Bell? 8 o'clock? Dead on. I'll see you there. I made arrangements with Mom to sit with the kids, and Dad said he would drop me off and pick me up. I think he was hoping it would give me a kick into having a social life again. So the next evening found me ensconced in the Bell with an old shipmate. We shot the shit about events, mates, ships, and cruises for a while. Then Jimmy got to the nub of why he wanted to see me. "I thought you might be interested in a bit of scuttlebutt on Constable Graham. Not if it affects the investigation, Jimmy." "Nah, it doesn't really affect it. Anyway, you know her father is ex-petty officer McVeigh." I nodded. Well, she was in her early teens when her father was jailed. When he came out, he hit the bottle even harder. The family had to sell the house, and McVeigh couldn't hold down a job for more than months. From what I can make out, he blamed you for everything. Eventually, his wife left him and took the daughter with her. But she accepted what she had heard from her father and held you responsible for what happened to her family. Anyway, she joined the police in Devon and did fairly well by all accounts. She married a sergeant and became Graham. It didn't last, of course, shifts for one thing, and neither of them could keep their pants on. In the meantime, she used her position to track you down and arranged a transfer just after her marriage broke up. It looks as if she had been watching you, hoping to get you on a speeding ticket or something and then provoke something worse. Then your wife dropped the assault thing in her lap. He necked the last of his pint. "Another?" "Sure thing, boss." I polished off my own. I set a fresh pint in front of him. Anyway, once she got the report, she got one of the probationers and took him out to lift you. She worked the old police cover each other's backs thing on him. I had to take him to the side and give him the gypsies. He was backing her story until I explained to him where it was taking him. He's a good lad, and I didn't want to see his career screwed up by that witch. It's easy done. He'd have been completely screwed if he is a probationer. Exactly. Anyway, I finessed his report for him, so it doesn't look as if he is shitting down her neck. I hope you won't mind. Shopping a colleague is nearly as big a career blocker. It won't affect your claim, though. I haven't made a claim. I'm leaving it all to my solicitor and your internal investigation at the moment. I didn't know that. You could be in the big bucks if you did. You should think about it, boss. The rest of the evening was spent in reminiscence and catching up. Jimmy had made it to petty officer before deciding to go ashore. His exemplary record had got him accepted by the police right away, and he was making a career out of it. I phoned my father for a lift home, and we dropped Jimmy off on the way. First thing next morning, I phoned Mila. You did what? You know better than to talk to the police without me there. Mila, it was all off the record. Jimmy was filling in the background for me. What he told me doesn't affect anything, does it? No, I suppose not. It might be useful if we are taking a case against the police since she used police systems and records, but I suppose there's no harm done. I'm going up to London for a couple of days on business. If you need me, I'll be at Jury's. We were finalizing details on a new contract, and the architects had arranged for all the contractors to get together for a rundown on the project. I probably could have commuted, but staying in town made more sense. The first day of the conference went as expected. That evening, after dinner, I was at a bit of a loose end. I didn't feel like sitting around the hotel bar. There was a franchising exhibition in a nearby conference center. Since the divorce, I had been a bit restless, wondering if I should have a change of direction. I thought the exhibition might be a bit of an omen, so I took a look. I was fairly unimpressed, to be honest. Most of the businesses were variations on Body Shop or Tie Rack, but there was one that caught my imagination. It was a women-only gym franchise. The girls on the stand were not exactly enamored of a man inquiring about it. They were emphasizing the philosophy of women-only staff to create a relaxed environment for the clientele. It might also make their husbands a bit more relaxed too, I said. How so? Well, there are plenty of stories about women falling for their trainer or coach. If the staff are women, the husbands might be less threatened. I wouldn't have thought you would have anything to feel threatened about. Her tone changed. She smiled, scenting genuine interest. I am Stephanie Walters. The exhibition is closing in 10 minutes. Perhaps we could discuss this over a drink? So we did, and a nightcap in my room. Next morning I awoke feeling much more like the young naval officer I once was. I hadn't sought out feminine company since Diane and I had separated. It wasn't for want of interest, but more down to family necessity. The kids came first. Now, I decided that it was time to use the weekends when they were with their mother to develop a social life. The conference was concluded successfully, and I returned with the revised specifications. There was a message waiting for me to contact Mila. Jack, that little meeting you had with Sergeant Henshaw? Yes. I think he may have been tipping their hand to us. What do you mean? We have been invited to a meeting with Assistant Chief Constable Wilson. Seems they want to discuss the case. An ACC getting involved in a domestic? Seems a bit too much gun. That's exactly what I thought. They are either trying to sweep it under the carpet or are trying to bully us into accepting something. Has Wilson not heard of you? I laughed. If he hasn't, he will wish someone had warned him. Make the arrangements, Mila, and we'll get together to thrash out our position. I'll give you a ring and let you know when. Over the next few days, the serendipity of my visit to the franchising exhibition kept playing on my mind. Whilst my antipathy to Peter and my initial desire to keelhaul him from stem to stern had subsided, it was not in my nature to see any crime go unpunished, nor was it in my nature to allow a slight against my family to go unavenged. Diane and Peter had both hurt my children and me. In hurting my children and me, they had hurt my parents. I was the witness to the days and nights of anxiety suffered by Harry and Georgie, trying to come to terms with the way their world was ripped apart. Not their mother. Peter may have been seduced by Diane, but he was a big boy who could work out for himself that getting involved with a married woman and mother would impact on her children. As such, he had to accept the consequences of those actions. The more I thought of it, the more it seemed the business opportunity had dropped into my lap. I phoned Stephanie and opened negotiations. Her company basically provided all the equipment and training required to set up the gym, but I would need premises. They provided basic specifications, and once I had identified a suitable location, they would arrange for their contractor to fit it out. I had David check the contracts. Once he was satisfied, all I had to do was find the finance. Autumn was turning to winter, and the first frosts hinted of a cold season. My plan was to get the gym up and running for the new year and all those resolutions. Once more, though, the fates conspired for me. Initially, there had been two co-owners of the boutique in which Diane worked, Lavinia and AITA. I was able to buy into it when they planned on expanding. That was the share that made up part of my divorce settlement. Lavinia's husband was planning to retire at 50, so they could travel before they got too old. She told Diane and AITA that she intended to sell her share of the business and gave them first refusal. I found this out through the usual sources, little ears. One weekend, Harry and Georgie overheard Diane and Peter discussing the opportunity. "Daddy, Mummy is going to sell our house," declaimed Georgie. "Mummy can't sell this house. It belongs to Granny and Granda," I told her. "No, not this house. Our house. In Devon. Don't let her, Daddy." "Well, I can't really stop her selling it, darling. It belongs to Mummy now, not me." "She wants to buy Mrs. Pritchard's share of the boutique, Dad," offered Harry. "She wants to retire next year. She probably needs the money so she can buy the business, Georgie." "But Daddy, it's our happy place. We have our holidays there, all together. Don't let her wreck that too." The tears shone in her eyes. That hurt. After everything she had put the kids through, this was another thing eroding their happy memories of us as a family. Just one more thing making them feel that they didn't matter to her. Now, I knew that wasn't the case, but that is not how the children saw it. Once more I saw the pain she was causing them, and she couldn't. This was all about her, and the devil take the hindmost. Inside I see that. To the children I had to present calm and reason. "Mummy has to look to the future, sweetheart. She wants to have a job to make money to take you on holidays and do her share of looking after you. She wouldn't have to sell our house if she hadn't left us." Georgie stormed out of the kitchen and went to her room. I looked at Harry. "She's really angry with Mum. She thinks she's forgotten about us. Mum talked of nothing else all weekend. I'm sorry, son, but I can't stop her selling the house. And someday you and Georgie won't want to spend so much time with your parents anymore." "Yeah, but she doesn't have to push us out of her life all the time, Dad." "She's not. She needs to plan for the future, Harry. Well, like Georgie said, she wouldn't have to if she hadn't pushed you out first. She's changed. It's all about her, Dad. Everything." It was Harry's turn to come close to tears. "I really can't stop her, son. The house became her property in the divorce. She can sell it if she wants. Then you could buy it." "I'm not sure I could afford it, Harry. You know, I've been looking at the idea of setting up a gym so I can be at home a bit more for you both. And where are we going to sail and fish when you're with us? Kids really know how to hit below the belt." "I'll think about it, son, but I really don't see how at the moment. So I'm not making any promises." Okay, Dad, I understand." So I thought about it. In a way, I wanted it back anyway. Georgie was right. It was our happy place. It held my best memories. It was where I got to spend most time with the children as they grew up. Suddenly, I was incandescent with rage that Diane could dispose of us so readily. I was heavily committed, financially, to the gym. I had signed the contract the previous week. I had a good hard look at my finances, and I just couldn't stretch to the likely price. However, this was for the children, so I switched into naval thinking. If I couldn't match the price, could I make the price match what I had? The house was old, on the coast, and over the years I had only done enough to make it usable as a summer retreat. The truth was that it really could do with a complete refurbishment. Maybe if it needed a bit more refurbishment, the price would be nearer my money. As a former damage control officer, I knew how much a ship fears water and the damage it can create in a short time. I also knew the poor condition of the pipework in the house. The children would be spending the weekend with their mother again. I had nothing planned. Till now, I spent the week organizing the equipment I needed. One of the advantages of working in the construction industry. Diane collected Harry and Georgie from school on Friday. First thing on Saturday, I was at the yard to collect the works van. Everything I needed was loaded. I had done this many times before, as when working on the stables. As long as everything was in working order or breakages reported, competent staff could hire company equipment. And since it was only hired to competent operators, they were responsible for any health and safety issues. 5 hours of constant driving got me to the Plymouth house by way of Bristol. There was no signboard indicating an impending sale, so there was less chance of any speculative viewers. I parked at the back of the house, got out and put on a pair of work gloves. As ever, the key was in its usual hiding place. I still had my own, but wasn't sure if Diane would have had the locks changed. She hadn't, as it turned out. I stretched out after the journey, before donning a pair of work gloves, unloading a small ladder, and an industrial pipe freezing kit. I carried everything into the roof space, and within minutes I had found a corroded section of pipe fed directly from the header tank. I froze a long section of it, slowly. The usual purpose is to simply freeze a plug to allow work to be carried out on the pipe. That way the ice doesn't swell and burst the pipe. By freezing it slowly along a long section, you can make the pipe swell. If it swells enough, it will burst. This used to be common in winter, in houses where the pipes weren't properly lagged. Even more likely in a section of corroded pipe. Once it had frozen hard, I allowed the central section to thaw slowly, while the rest of the water column was still frozen solid. As it came up the point of thawing, the pipe split. I removed all the equipment, ensured the stopcocks were open, locked the house and left, using a route to join the motorway outside Southampton. It was 9 o'clock before I was back to the yard to collect my car. I picked up a biryani from my favorite Indian restaurant and headed home. Sitting in the kitchen, I was enjoying the meal with a lager, mulling over my actions. Dispassionately, I felt I should feel some shame for what I had done, but there were no regrets whatsoever. Diane had hurt the children and then hurt them again. I was furious with her insensitivity to them. This was retribution for that. She would still get money, just not as much as she hoped. Diane delivered the children back on Sunday afternoon. Harry says you want to buy the house in Devon off me. Actually, Georgie told me you were thinking of selling. Harry asked me if I would buy. They have a lot of fond memories of it. Well, who knows? I might give you a discount for a cash sale, if you can get near my price, she sneered. I had just told her the children wanted it because of the memories it held for them, and she comes up with that? If I'd had any compunction about my actions, that would have been enough to clear my conscience. As it was, it simply convinced me I had done the right thing. For them, I'll try. The flicker in her eyes told me I'd hit home with that. Well, I was thinking of putting it on the market around December. You know, catch people when they are thinking of next year's holidays. Let me know before you do anything. I'll see if I can match your price or offer a cash deal. Yes, I'll do that. I need the money to buy out Lavinia. I suppose I wouldn't have been offered the chance if you hadn't bought the share in the business in the first place. She turned just as she got to her car, and I swear her eyes were unusually shiny. Good. She deserved it. Then she drove off. After the short, sharp, cold snap, Monday promised a warmer, autumnal week. I was barely into the office before Milla phoned. Jack, are you fixed on Friday? The police have asked if we can meet to discuss your arrest. About time. I'll clear my diary. Just let me know when and where. How are Harry and Georgie? They are okay. Diane and Aisha have been offered Lavinia's share of the boutique. She is thinking of selling the Plymouth house to get the money. The kids see it as her writing out another part of their lives. Are they taking it hard? They are a bit. Even Harry. What are you going to do? I'm going to see if I can raise the money to buy it off her. A quick sale, for cash. What about the gym? You've signed the contract, haven't you? Yes. I'll have to wait and see the valuation before I know for sure. That week became one of the busiest I've ever had. Diane phoned back on Monday afternoon to let me know we were invited to meet ACC Wilson at 11:30 on Friday at his offices. Tuesday, the estate agent I was using phoned to ask me to have a look at some premises he thought would suit the gym project. That afternoon, and the project I was working on was brought forward, with a commencement date 2 weeks ahead.